Oh, good stuff, mate.
Cool. And just for the team as well, because I remember you had a pretty high performing forum. Who was part of your forum back in the day?
Yeah, we had Dave Ansett, who was a former print, Christina Carlson from Kiki K, Grant Rule, who owned Message Media and probably maybe about a year ago, and this is public record, sold his business for, I think it was 1.4 billion, like with a B, not an M. Joe Horgan from Mecca Cosmetics. Wow. Andy Millett from Plexus. I was very fortunate to be part of that. Graham Van Dam. Who else? Tim, who owns Fonda. I think that I'm sure I've probably forgotten someone. But yeah, we were pretty stable. We didn't have too many people coming and going, and there was a period of time where we were even discussing sort of going off on our own and having our own forum, which like I steadfastly voted against. And I think, and so that forum's still going, but most of the members that I knew, moved on to YPO or, I know having a break. Oh, Geary, also from APT Tours. I think he was part of EO for like 20 years or something like that. So yeah, it was really nice to come into a forum that had some pedigree. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes I think you guys are, what do they call that? Like a Genesis forum or something like that.
Yeah, we just came together about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah. And how long were you in EO for in total?
What was it? I think it would have been 6 or so. It would have been about 6 or 7 years. Like I stayed on about another year after the exit. And yeah, because I was at the end, I wasn't sure what direction I was going, and I didn't feel like I was providing much value to the forum. Like I didn't have any business stuff to really kind of discuss. So, and I think I just, I was ready to have a bit of a break anyway. So, so about 6 or 7 years, I think.
Yeah, great. So we've all listened to your podcast.
Oh my God, this is, does anybody want an autograph? This is the most amount of eyeballs or ear holes I've ever had sort of directed my way. I think that's part of the reason why Christina wanted to get a recording, because she's like, well, why do people want to ask you anything? And I was like, yeah, thanks, babe. So.
Anthony, just behind me here, said, I think the key takeaway from the podcast was that I just need to find that one hire and I'll be rich.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of, going into that, they wanted to focus on, how do you get a great lieutenant, all that sort of stuff. And obviously there's a lot more to it than that. And I was sort of doing it as a way to thank the management team and to help them onto their next sort of venture. And so the focus was very heavily on Nick, but we had a great management team, we had a great business, and so it was very Nick centric. And I would have liked to have had more opportunity to sort of speak about the other managers, because like I'm there to support Nick and instill values and things like that. And Nick is there to support the managers, and Nick can't succeed without a great management team. So I don't think that came through in the podcast, but we certainly had a killer management team.
Yeah, awesome. Well, actually, what we might do is we might just go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Yep.
And then, maybe we could just hit it off with some questions and whatnot. Obviously, you know all about me. For those that know, Damien's actually my mentor. So we probably about 6 months ago, through the EO mentor program connected, and we've been in touch since. And obviously we've met a number of times, and we actually, the last meeting we did, he brought along his mentor and coach for a period of time, who is now starting coaching with myself as of tomorrow, actually. So that's so that's a bit of a background why Damien's you know, been nice enough to give up his time and jump on the call today. But yeah, so maybe we'll just go to Anthony and work from there.
Cool. Hey mate, I'm Anthony. I run a business called Punchy Digital Media. We do explainer videos, mostly for public sector. So you can NGOs.
Nice one.
Cool. Hey, Damien. Gabriel from Salt and Fusel. We're an online marketing agency, basically working on SEO, Google Ads, website, generate leads and sales for our clients.
Excellent.
Hey, I'm Dan. I own Harley Rugs. We're a national retailer of luxury handmade rugs.
Nice one.
Hi, I'm Danny. I run a end-to-end design and construction company in residential market. So we do new builds, alterations and additions primarily.
Yeah, I jumped on the Andy shares forum members and the links to the business. So I jumped on, and then I saw Dan, and I know Dan from F45, not particularly well, your husband. So I was like, oh, Dan's going to be in a room. Great. I haven't spoken to him for ages because obviously you've got a similar name. So yeah, say hi to him for me. He was he was an animal.
Oh my gosh, so we just bought a couple of strong territories off Ramsey.
Oh yeah. We saw him in Bali. We were in Bali a few weeks ago.
Oh, we were supposed to go, but then we didn't have the time.
Yeah, nice. Well, say hi to him for me.
I will.
How you doing? My name's Anton. I own a sexual wellness retailer. So basically, sell sex toys online.
Excellent. Nice.
I'm Merav. I have a company that it's basically a brand house. We work with retailers in Australia and build full turnkey programs for like private labels and exclusive brand programs. Yeah, your business was one where I saw it and I thought I'm not even familiar with this sector. I'm not even familiar with another business like that. So it's pretty in the industry.
Yeah, oh, nice one. Well, let's get into it. Look, I know that there's 20 minutes. I'm not going to make it a hard thing or anything like that. So we've got to go, but I think you guys are heading to the pub anyway. So you'll probably be trying to scurry out as quickly as possible. So yeah, whoever wants to go first, let's just start with an easy one.
An easy one.
Can you talk us through your management team and who exactly what the roles were and how much of, I remember you mentioned growing the profit margin, like how much visibility did the management team have over the numbers, top line, bottom line, and the general company? I think it's kind of two questions there.
Yeah, sure. So what a lot of people think is that we were a health company, when in actual fact we were a logistics company. So our podiatrists were on salary and we were paid per treatment. And so if, for us to make money, we had to make sure that we had the right person at the right place at the right time and they were productive enough, which can be a challenge when you're in the health environment because, people sort of equate working efficiently with not providing an appropriate amount of care, which, there's what we wanted to do is streamline the systems so they were able to spend more time with the patient for physical and emotional comfort, and all the rest of it, streamline that so, they could still be productive and provide great healthcare. So that being said, we had we had budget sessions every 2 weeks, and the managers would come in. They absolutely knew what the top line was. They knew what the budget was for their department, and if they were over budget for that, we do a check-in every 2 weeks, but then at the end of every month we would come together and look at how they performed, and if they were over, they then had to find savings the next month. And it was a bigger meeting every quarter. So if we didn't hit our numbers every quarter, there was something you were going to have to drag out next quarter to make it work. And so obviously that all starts with annual planning around, this is where we want to be at the end of the year. And a lot of that was shaped by, it wasn't shaped by a SHAGs, which is the small, hairy, audacious goals. They were more things around service delivery and customer retention, and I think an NPS score for the staff to make sure they were happy. But yeah, everybody knew what the top line targets were. Sales knew what work they needed to bring in, and everybody knew what their budget was. And so we were really full on about that, like really full on. The other, I think, a key piece that we got right was something that we called the golden triangle, which is where we got the key salesperson in with HR and with who was it? I think it was just with our COO or CEO. And the reason why we did that is that we had a great salesperson, but salespeople are salespeople. Like, I'm a salesperson myself, really, and they just want to kill and eat. They don't care if a salesperson come back and say, I've got a 100-bed facility, and ask him where, and he's likely to say, I don't know, like Antarctica or something like that. It was like, mate, you need to make sure you're getting work where we've got staff, or we're able to get staff. So, so I think that was a key piece in making sure that the mechanics of the business ran really well, that we had that golden triangle really often. So it was HR, it made finance, and it was sales. And so what HR is saying is that, look, we've got a waiting list of podiatrists in this particular area. You need to hit that area hard. So yeah, it was always about not just getting more work, it was about getting more profitable work. Because if we got one facility off in the middle of nowhere, financially it just wasn't viable for us to do that work, which was a tough situation, because we did 24% of facilities in Australia, and we did pretty much all the big groups. So if they opened a facility in Mildura, they would expect us to do that work. So recruitment for us was always the big bottleneck, but with the rebranding and just running the business much more effectively, we were able to sort of unlock that. And I think that that's a key thing for any business owner to do, is to really look at your business and try to identify what's your bottleneck. What is your key bottleneck? What is the thing that's holding you back? Is it recruitment? Is it sales? So yeah, it was full transparency. Podiatrists, it was tough, because one of my former GMs, we used to pay podiatrists per treatment, which was really nice, because it meant that we were able to keep the GP at a really consistent level. And then she wanted to change that, and I didn't agree with it, but I also believe in supporting my team. And so I said, look, I don't agree with this, but I'm going to back the decision. And that set us back a long way. Like, we were almost insolvent a few years after that, because we'd made this change, and then podiatrists are kind of like, well, I'm on a salary, I'll just have a 2-hour lunch, or do something like that. And so we really had to make sure that what we should have done is, we're going to make that change, we really need to have systems set up to support that sort of business model, and we did it. So so what we ended up doing is putting podiatrists on tiers, and the more treatments they did within them, the higher the tier level would be, they'd go up to, and they would all have like a group manager or field manager or whatever, and it was their responsibility to make sure that all podiatrists that were operating on a tier and being paid according to that tier were doing that level of work. And we could see that data in real time. So we use Salesforce and iPads, and like, this is quite a while ago. This is at least 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. We could see if podiatrists were lagging, because you had to pay them the salary. You couldn't just turn around and just go, oh, well, you're only doing 80% of your numbers. They're going to pay you 80% of your salary. So it was a difficult thing to manage, especially given how strong the culture was in the company. It's kind of easy in the short term to get people to work really hard and have a shitty culture. But that was, we were never about that. We were about building, something sustainable and operating within the sort of do right, be loved, go beyond values. I'm going to stop because otherwise I'll only answer one question for the for the whole thing.
You sort of touched on culture there, Damien, and it's actually something we spoke at length about today. And I know just from our conversations, there was there was a period where you had to go from sort of I wouldn't say unprofessional, but there was people that were fucking around taking the piss, and I think it was around the time you brought the CEO in, that you wanted to have a more professional team, and still have that culture, but you had to make a lot of changes, and you had to get rid of some people. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, I think that part of the problem we had back then was that firstly, at that stage the company was relatively small. I mean, you guys heard the story, it was big and then collapsed, and then I had started again. So so when a company's that size, it sort of has a bit of a family feel about it, and everybody's kind of more friends than colleagues. And we all love working together. And so, and also too, the team's really young. Like I was, by far the oldest person there. So, as we sort of started to grow and I wanted us to become more professional, and people hear that, but it's not until they start seeing actions for misdemeanors or something like that. So so that was part of that was a bit of a challenge for a while. There's other things that we did, but during our quarterly planning sessions, one thing that we would always do is that we would, if we had 100 staff members, we'd go through and work out, if you sort of, I can't remember if it's A, B, C, or D, but if you've got great culture, great performance, let's say that's in the top right-hand corner, and let's say that's B. Okay, that's where you want most of your staff. If you've got someone who's, say, a great culture, but poor performance, they would be in the bottom right-hand corner. So let's say that one's D. So great culture, performance, they're horrible people to have to fire because, you love them, but they're dragging the company down. And then the the bottom left-hand corner, you've got, shit culture, shit people, shit performance. That's easy. Our agreement with our team was that anybody who's identified in that quadrant C, had to be let go within 7 days of the meeting. And so then you're putting strategies in place to, people who are good performers but poor cultural fit, which is often, in our business at least with sales. How do you ingrain culture into someone who's not really that interested in it? So there's different strategies you can use to, obviously, people, great culture but poor performance. How do you manage them up? So yeah, there's a lot of different things about instilling values, but also being proactive and looking at your team, and then, as I said, every quarter working out who's where in the quadrant. And we wouldn't do it name by name. We would just say what percentage is in quadrant C. Their poor performance, poor culture. And so you'd always want to make sure that that's as close to zero as possible, and you're moving people into the ideally towards the B quadrant. So my message there is you've got to be really proactive. People love boundaries. And if they don't have boundaries, they'll create them themselves. And when that happens, then it might be fun, but it's going to end up being pretty bloody chaotic.
I have a question. Was exit always your main goal of the business? And if so, was your strategic plan and hires been in line with that main goal, or was it something that did it just come
Evolved?
from business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My definition of a business is a commercial, profitable enterprise that works without you. So for most of my business career, I was only working a day a week. So to me, the business was making pretty good money. I didn't see any sense in, selling a business that's making a few million, and, I'm loving it. I've got a sense of importance. It's not too onerous on me. I'm learning new things. And my CEO came to me once and said, I think that we should start to look at selling. I've got a feeling we should, start to look at selling. And I said, why? And he said, I just feel like there's some headwinds coming into the industry. And so I said, look, you said the word feel to me a few times. If you can get me some data and show me the canary in the coal mines, then I'm fine. We can look at an exit then. So that was sort of how we came to that. So it wasn't so much, I never had that intention that, we're going to get this ready to sell it. I was always aware that could happen. And so once we made that decision, what we did was, obviously all the management team knew about it. And I think we called it Project Unicorn. So Nick, my CEO, he suggested we call it Project Canary, because of the canary in the coal mine. And like Nick's he's an accountant. So I was like, what the fuck? I've said to you, we've got to sell it if there's a problem. And then you want to brand the project as we've got a problem, so we've got to sell it. There's no fucking way. We're going to call this Project Unicorn. We're a unicorn. We've got 24% market share. Not businesses in the world have that. So, and the reason why we called it Project Unicorn was that we needed to be able to discuss it without people going, oh my God, you can't have your staff know a year out that you're going to sell. So that's why we gave it that title. What else can I tell you about that? And then really, once we made the decision to sell, then we worked really hard on the 3 shags we had in the company, which one was about a productivity level, that if the podiatrists were operating at that, we were very profitable. One was an end score from the staff, and the other one was a level of retention with clients. So we felt that if we could go to the marketplace and say, look, we're really productive, really profitable, our clients don't leave us and our staff loves us, then, there's a lot of utility in that asset. And, that would make a pretty attractive strategic acquisition for someone.
Thank you.
And then, going into the last year, when you're working towards that, then you just got to keep a close eye on the financials, because you know that if you're aiming for a 7 times, every dollar you spend is $7. So, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, during Christmas parties, birthdays, we're not going to have a cake or anything like that. You still need those other shags working for you. You still need the culture working. But you are absolutely cutting out all waste, because you want to go to them and show them, look, this is what we're making, but this is what we're projected to make. And that's what we were able to sell off.
There was a part that you in the interview that you were telling how you documented the journey for 18 months for each one of your team members and where they wanted to be, or how do you manage that process of the plan and the progress that you made? What was the vision, or what was the goal that you gave to them? Were you open about we're actually selling it and this is why we're going to be doing it, or you just did it and then by chance it actually worked well for you?
Yeah, I think what we were trying to do is that people want to grow. We had a young team, and you want people to when I first started the business, I thought that the only thing that people really cared about was money and remuneration. And then I quickly learned that, there's a lot of other things, culture and things like that. And, we had such a young team that, and a lot of them just worked in a very specific industry, podiatry, that a lot of people did want to grow into management positions and things like that. So as I said, our bottleneck was always recruitment. So the last thing you want to do is start to fix your recruitment hole bucket. The last thing you want to do is start pouring more water into your recruitment bucket, but then it's the hole that's getting bigger and, people flying out of the business. So I think if, you can say do right, be large, go beyond, but, what does that mean? Well, it means, sitting down with your staff and working out, well, what are their dreams? What do they want their life to look like? And how can we, help sort of manifest that for them? And if you do something like that, then, like the dynamics, the hierarchy between, well, you guys are management and I'm a staff member, that starts to diffuse and it feels a lot more collegiate and cooperative. So, I think all of our team, whether it was a specific roadmap, I think all of our team, grew over time. And this is the great thing about getting, one thing I know that when I was a smaller business, I didn't really know what good looked like. Like it's not until you get, and I was really very purposeful in what I wanted from Nick. I don't know if I haven't listened to the podcast for years, but when I went to the recruitment agency, and it was 35 grand, and I think we were making like 190 grand or something at that stage. But I just had enough of dealing with people that I just I didn't think were, quite frankly, sort of at my level. And 35 grand's a lot of money, and sit down with the recruitment agent and mapped out what the person would look like in terms of if they were a football coach, because most people can kind of relate to a football coach. And I was saying, look, I hope there's no Collingwood supporters, but Mick Malthouse, this is a long time ago. It's kind of all about him. And I need someone that when they come in, the older players who think they're going to be moved on realise actually, this person's here to extend my career, not to just throw me out. And at that stage, it was Ken Hinkley, and I just went through and painted a really vivid picture of what that person looked like, because my job in that meeting is to show her this is exactly who I want. And so when she feels the candidate pool, it's not so much about the hard things. Oh, it needs to be an accountant, or it needs to do this, or it needs to be some work around that. But I think it's when you meet someone and then you can sort of frame the questions around what I was looking for. I think that was probably one of the best things I ever did in a business. And I've never really discussed it. I don't know if that's discussed on the podcast, but obviously getting Nick was, it was a good move. We worked really well together. Now, since then, Nick's gone off and, he's worked with other businesses and, it didn't work out. So, it's not, I didn't recruit Jesus Christ. I recruited Nick Beckett, and he was a good fit for me. The yin and yang worked really well. And so then when you get someone like that in and you're working well and you see what sort of level they're at, then obviously their network's pretty strong. And then the whole team starts to get an idea of what good looks like. And so I think that when you start to do that, everybody starts to rise and grow. So, and just on that with recruitment, this is a really simple one. This is one thing my dad told me when I was young. And it was very simple, but it was very true. If you're ever thinking about firing someone, fire them. Like if you're thinking about firing someone, they're clearly not a high performer and a high cultural fit. And in all my experience, every time I did fire someone, we're thinking about it, immediately it helped the business. And for anybody who I didn't and kept them on, it always compromised the business. So it's pretty simple, but it always rang pretty true for me.
I do have another question in regards to your leadership team. You mentioned that you brought them along in this sales journey. Were they on a just wage? Did you offer them shares of the business? Were they invested into a business? How did you get them to buy into that? Cool. If we win, we all win through this sale.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I don't think people join a business for that reason. I don't think they really start for that reason. People want to do interesting work. They want to work with smart people. You know, sometimes it's as simple as they just want to, you know, get away from their young family and do something that they find intellectually stimulating. And so they want to be around other people like that. So everybody generally wants to work at a business that's got a great culture. And yeah, that was my role. Like my role is to sell the business, to sell the values, you know, sell the business to facilities, sell it to staff, sell it to all stakeholders. And so you know, one thing that founders have to be great at is storytelling. And so if the story is compelling enough, then people may not know exactly what the end of the story looks like, but they think, you know what, I'm happy to join because I'm going to enjoy, you know, flipping the pages. So, so yeah, specifically though, no, there wasn't, other than that Nick was on the ESOP, but the rest of the team, they were incentivized in terms of if they hit their budget and things like that, everybody was incentivized like that. And then once we sold the business, you know, I took out a bit of cash, like a fair bit of cash, and just, you know, gave it to the key people who made some real differences. But that was never specifically stated, and you know, for tax reasons, it was just considered a gift.
Cool. Okay.
Let's put it this way: if people are incentivized and they're given shares or whatever, and they're not happy with where they're at, they're going to see those as almost like, I wouldn't even call them handcuffs, I'd just say handcuffs. Whereas if it's somewhere where they love and maybe they're, you know, they're still incentivized, then they're going to be much more productive. If they feel like they're stuck but they hate working there, that's, you know, that I don't think that's going to be a particularly productive result for anyone. And I know that sometimes it feels like the easiest way to go. And maybe if your business is there with the culture and the story and all that sort of stuff, maybe it's something worth looking at. But I personally found incentivizing with budgets was really good because people knew that every quarter, you know, they're going to get a drink if they help move the business in the right direction. Thanks.
Cool. Is there any more questions, guys?
I think the podcast was really enlightening, to be honest. So there was a lot of valuable information about your story. And maybe the only question that I have is, where did you get the energy to restart the business when it crumbled? What was the
Oh, that was easy.
within?
Yeah, that was easy. Well, I mean, revenge. Like I got fucked over like nobody. I don't even know how much I talked about that thing, but it was you know, it was pretty brutal. Got on the front page of the Age. You know, went to war. And also too, like it was like, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I've never thought about working for someone else. I started the business when I was 24. Went into the industry because I thought there were good business opportunities. The industry hated me because I was a business guy. Almost got kicked out of uni 5 times. You know, it wasn't like I was going to go work somewhere. I wouldn't have wanted to, and nobody would have employed me. Could have maybe done sales somewhere, but you know, I'm just not really built like that. I'm like so unemployable, it's ridiculous. So, you know, when you know that you've got fucked over and, you know, you sort of did it once, but you kind of thought you were a rock star and maybe you sort of deserve some of the punches in the nose. And, you know, I don't know, like I'm pretty competitive and I don't mind going to war actually. Like it's the biggest war I've ever had. It was pretty fun. It wasn't fun to be in it, but I tell you what, like, you know, when you're fighting for your, because I lost everything. Like, wealth, reputation, friends, you know, there's no one you could trust. And it was way beyond like what you guys have been told. Like it was very, very full on. So yeah, it was incredibly tiring because, you know, you're dealing with all this shit. There's so much shit you've got to deal with when you're going through liquidation, and then, you know, the Podiatry Association uses an opportunity to, you know, knock me around. So you're always in all this stuff that's just not moving the business forward. All this sort of legacy shit. So, and then I'm off, you know, treating patients again, which, you know, like I love spending time doing this. I'm really proud about what we did with them, and just enjoyed spending time with them. But, you know, having to treat 75 patients in a day and drive everywhere I was driving, and then run the company, and then deal with all this other sort of shit, like energy was crucial. So specifically to sort of answer part of that, the way I sort of, there wasn't much time, but the only people I could trust when this all went down was my family. Because even staff members would say, yeah, I'm gonna stay with you, but then they would go out in opposition to you and stuff like that. So yeah, stick with, you know, those who are close with you. And that was sort of nourishing enough. And actually a good thing, yeah, actually this is a good way to answer that question. I was pretty cooked, and yeah, I was so frustrated at all this sort of stuff. And I said to my mum, like, that's it, like, I'm done. I don't want to do this shit anymore. I'm going to go off and start another business somewhere else. Like, it's that easy. And she said to me, look, you know, I think it would have been July. She said, if it's still like this no, I think it was September. She said, if it's still this bad in March next year, then throw it in. But otherwise, stick with it. And the great thing about that was it sort of felt like a thing had come off my shoulders, and I was able to sort of quarantine all that frustration and angst and just go, you know what, now I can just be present, focus on what needs to be done. And if by March it's not working, then I can just bin it. I don't know what I would have done after that, but yeah, so that was really, yeah, something I was super grateful for mum, because my relationship with business was with my dad, but that was one of those things where it was like, actually, that was, you know, fucking good advice.
Yeah, it's quite honest. And
All right. Well, I think you guys are heading off to the pub. Andy, this was a good idea. Like, it was when you suggested it, I thought, shit, I don't know what to talk about with leadership, but getting the guys to listen to the podcast and then field some questions was a good way to do it. I think it was a good use of time as well. So I'm glad you all enjoyed it. I actually hadn't slept the night that I did that podcast. That was a crazy, that was I don't know if I mentioned the podcast, I sold the business, then Richmond won the grand final. And you know, that was our first grand final. Like, I was a long suffering Richmond supporter. So it was, you know, it was just a perpetual party. So yeah, you can hear at the start of the podcast, like, I'm super, super rusty.
Yeah, he spoke well. I thought there was, everything was great.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to eat and sleep.
It was the biggest contrast in like typical American introduction, and then
Oh yeah.
right.
He's a good guy. He's a good guy. He's really good. And you know, I've been talking to Andy about, Jasmine's really good on camera. I'm not good on camera. I'm not that sort of person. I'm too introverted for that sort of stuff. But it is absolutely a skill to be able to talk to a camera and even just interview someone. Like, you know, I listen to Joe Rogan, and I'm always impressed at how good his recall is, and just how he's able to keep conversations going. So yeah, it is absolutely a skill. So yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for that. Good luck for the rest of the year, and
Thank you.
I'll see you around. Nice. Bye-bye.
Bye.